I'd like to call to order the Eastham Zoning Task Force meeting. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over local access channel 8 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. Good morning, everyone. We have a quorum with us today, and we also have a prospective task force member, Tom McNillis, who we have recommended, and he will be voted upon by the select board next week. So thank you, Tom, for joining us, even in an unofficial capacity. And I said to folks that as I was proposing, I said, one of the things that I do is when I meet with folks, I really talk about somewhat the intensity of the work and some of the readings that we have. And Tom is wide open to all of that and has been diving in. So I'm delighted. So welcome, Tom. Can I ask if everyone, task force members have received minutes that Carolyn has done? Thank you, Carolyn. Carolyn stepped down as the secretary of the committee, but we haven't let her stop taking minutes. Yeah, Pat Canavan will be taking over the mantle there, and Pat works a part-time seasonal job, which is going to wind down October 15th. So her time will be much more open, as is, and we have one member, Kevin, who is probably eating pasta in Italy right now. Oh, yeah. So he's dinner time. Yeah. So we're thrilled with this. So can I get a motion to adopt the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of September 9th.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Jay, do you have the, what was the first? Carolyn, can I just see the agenda quickly?
The topics.
Yeah, I think we're just going to switch those up a little bit. That's why I wanted to check that. Okay, but we were at the select board meeting last night and we got some good feedback, but because we have with us Rachel and representing housing, we thought we would take the first topic today and really dive into the inclusionary, so we can have a conversation about that. And I think it's just important to know, we presented 10 issues to the task force. We presented 10 issues to the select board, and I sort of emphasized to them that the workload is such that there's no way we can get to the 10 issues. It's important to get their feedback. So I think one of the things we will do today is we will go through the issues and try to do a little prioritization, so we know that. But the other thing, given our schedule, is that we're really going to need to tackle probably a whole topic area at each meeting, where we will ask Paul to sort of give us information ahead of time that we can review, probably give him feedback around policy direction, et cetera, and then he can go off, whether individually or with staff or with consultants, to sort of write up the technical things. But we're not going to have the ability to sort of have multiple meetings over, at least preliminary meetings over every topic, if in fact we're going to get to mid-December with at least some semblance of a core set of recommendations. So that's a little bit of preview. We have, for inclusionary zoning, we passed this several years ago, 2 years ago at least, inclusionary, and some of the first private sector projects are coming to the fore, have come before Paul, and some of the what I'd call complications or burden for some really small projects has raised the issue of, let's take a look at this. Paul was able to access technical consultants from the commission who gave us an analysis as well. So with that, Paul, can you walk us through what you see? This report has a lot of nits around a word here or there, or a technical thing here and there, and Paul's going to go through that, but there's some big fundamental policy questions in terms of revisiting inclusionary that Paul will highlight what the current experience is and what the policy issues are, and we can have a full discussion on that.
Yeah, so like Mary said, we were able to get this pretty inclusive review of our current IZ bylaw, and it has a lot of nuts and bolts cleanup items clarity and consistency items, but we've had one official project come through triggering the IZ, and we have another one that we've been working, Jackie and I've been working on a preliminary scale, hasn't officially been submitted to the planning board, but we know enough to realize it's gonna be a similar issue. So really, with the two projects so far, they've been small scale projects, only requiring one inclusionary unit. And the primary issue identified by the owners, and these are local, they're not developers, they're local business folks who are trying to redevelop their lot and add some housing, redevelop their commercial properties and add housing elements. So they're not housing developers per se. The primary issue identified is that they don't want to incur the expense of paying for the rent up, the rental lottery, the procurement of affirmative fair housing marketing plan, and the ongoing, or I should say, the rental monitoring requirements. These are the like major requirements. The reason these are required is because the way our bylaw is set up, it forces all of the inclusionary units to be included in the state's subsidized housing inventory, the SHI. The SHI is what the state looks at as the units on their count towards the goal of the town getting towards 10% affordability, which is the state's goal. So our bylaw, like I said, the language is all constructed in there, really make it clear that these units should be counting on the SHI. And then so once we're in that zone, we're locked into, we have to adhere to all the state requirements and the ways of product procedures and protocols. Rachel, please jump in anywhere from the speech.
No, you're doing good.
So I mean, that's the big basic issue, and it's a cost issue and a capacity issue. And in the project we just concluded, or it's not, but they got their first round of approvals. And this is for the Cape Associates project, this is all public knowledge. So this is the Cape Associates project on Massasoit. They're redoing the old capabilities building. So they're gonna add a second floor and units, and that triggers at least the one unit. You were able to kind of have a workaround for that, where instead of doing the lottery, which, and this is pointed out in the report, lotteries can cost $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 to run. It doesn't matter if you're doing it for one unit or 20 units or 100 units, pretty much the same. So that's where the pushback is. So we had a workaround with the state agencies to basically say, instead of doing the lottery, we can get this unit to be included on the regional ready renters list. Which is,
And there's still a requirement to do the affirmative fair housing marketing plan, individual to that unit.
What does that entail?
Well, it entails, you have to provide some documentation. They'll ask for qualifications of the builder, qualifications of staff to be managing such a unit. I mean, it's really more in line with companies, larger companies that are used to doing affordable housing market management. They're gonna look for how you're going to market. They're gonna be required to put ads in a couple of different papers for a certain amount of time, send information out to an outreach list, and also do some minority outreach as well to encourage everyone to apply. And they would have to provide their application for approval. They would have to describe how they're going to run the lottery or use the ready renters list, and then how they're going to maintain those applications afterward into a wait list. If they don't maintain a wait list, if they close it, how they're going to reopen it when vacancy occurs and go through the same process again.
Could the ready renter list serve as the waiting list?
Yes,
But
yes.
But still be all the other
yes,
stuff.
so the issue, so that's what we were able to do for this project, but the issue there is that there isn't like a Cape wide ready renter list. It's basically a list that the town of Yarmouth, Barry Wagon is a one person operation and she manages it. And it's basically at her discretion where she can include other towns, other projects into it, but it's a capacity issue for her. And so we were able to just kind of as a one-off, she agreed to take this on again because it's only one unit. So that was the workaround for this one, but this will continue to be an issue. We don't know that we'll always have. So aside from, yes, we could create a regional ready renter list for Outer Cape or Cape, I mean, but that's like a separate issue. It doesn't really address that. Right now, the way the bylaw is set up, we will always have this issue of it's either incurring the expense and all of the processes of the state or developed by something else. The other thing I'll point out on this project that happened was because this project is basically a retrofit of an existing building and working with the confines and footprint and so forth. The units are not in alignment with the minimum size requirements that the state requires for inclusion under the local initiative program. So these units are slightly smaller. So the developer is going to need to get a waiver for that, which we talked to the state folks and that shouldn't be a problem because they understand, they're trying to retrofit. In the discussion that happened at the planning board, the rationale was trying to retrofit this to make it fit was going to change the parameter of the whole project and it would have been ultimately to the detriment of the units. So we kind of justified the waiver in that way, but it's still a process that the applicant has to go. And then again, it's all tied to the fact that these have to be included on the SHI. So.
I just want to have when you said the workaround, the regional ready list, I have two questions to that. If Cape Associates goes through this process as you've just outlined, does that unit then end up on the SHI?
This one will yes,
It will
be
eventually.
SHI.
Okay.
Okay, assuming they get the waiver for the size.
Get the waiver and the ready renter list we've already talked to the state there. That's an acceptable.
Yeah.
Substitution, but again, it's not something we know we can rely on every time.
Right.
Is that, sorry, Mary.
Good. No, my second question was, we have a business person here, Matt Cole, who's very sensitive to issues of affordable housing and, how does he feel about this workaround? Because it still feels a little onerous to me for one unit.
I think he's preferring this very much over, I mean, there's still a cost incurred by him
okay.
but it's not as much as running the full lottery. So I think he was satisfied with that,
Okay.
but I think our feedback, I know you can talk.
I mean, I don't want to speak for him, he's not in the room, but he did say during the planning board meeting, so on record, he's making a choice to still go for 6 units, where they could have redesigned this down to a 4-unit project with the same number of total bedrooms, but they're doing 6 1-bedrooms. He could easily have done 2 2-bedrooms and 2 1-bedrooms and relieve them from this entire process. So he, knowing all of this and with everything he has to go through, still made the choice to participate. So
Do you have
I think I've done a good job. So being on the regional ready list is still counted towards the SHI list and you no longer has to do a lottery. So, yeah.
But it's a one-off solution and the next project that comes in may not be able
Right.
to do the same thing.
And-
It strikes me as just a separate aside, not related to what we decided on zoning, but with the work that we did on the Northeast Ham area where we want a lot of redevelopment and taco shop kind of stuff, we're gonna face this issue a lot.
Right. It's all also the smaller.
Right. Right, all property parcel, except for tea time, it's all pretty small, and so separately, whether it's talking with Matt, with someone else, creating a Outer Cape entity that would take on those requirements. Like we're using the ready renter list, you know, that's a whole separate kind of thing, but trying to, I don't know if the peer group has talked about doing anything like that.
Oh, ready renters
A
list?
ready renters list
Right.
and someone that would be responsible for doing the advertising and the fair housing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we need to solve that problem. That's a separate issue. That's not this issue at the moment, but finding a way and maybe at some point, because Matt, his company is involved in a lot of different housing components, and I think he's making. And again, I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I'm just going on what he said on public record. He's moving into the support of affordable housing and biting the bullet that comes with some administrative requirements. Maybe it becomes a business initiative. And he takes that, would be willing to take that on a regional basis. I don't know. That's down the road and so forth. We have to deal with the here and now. How do we fix this so that the next 2 or 3 or 4 small projects don't have to go through the same onerous
Yeah,
process?
and I think regardless, they will have to go through the process that they're going through as a local action unit, because that's what's required of the state. So if Matt, for instance, goes ahead and there's a ready renter list, and 2 years down the road, somebody else goes to do the same thing for 1 unit or 2 units, they're still gonna have to do all this advertising and.
Right, but if there was an entity that had experience and capability, capacity, just do it.
Yeah, well,
They could just pay a fee.
there are agencies that can do that, and there is a fee, and I think, back to Paul's point, it can cost a lot of money regardless of whether it's 1 unit or 65.
Well, I mean, I think
But in
that
the lottery, I mean, everything but fair housing stuff.
Yeah, they would-
what I'm hearing is we don't on the Outer Cape or maybe anywhere on the Cape have the structural infrastructure to outsource the administration of these things. And I want to just go back. I mean, this is just my perspective from when we were doing this. We were doing a variety of things of really advocating and building in bonuses for top of shop housing and limiting the size of them because we really wanted workforce housing. We really wanted the tradespeople, the restaurant service, whatever, to have opportunities to live above the shop. And we also did want affordability, which is why we sort of had the trigger at 5. The question I've asked Paul is, it's sort of a question of, could we, for example, in the zoning, carve out, think of the smaller projects. If the objective is to have them built, to have affordability, there's a big question. These 1 units here and there, do we care or we care, but is it critical that they be on the SHI list? I mean, it's a balance between, a goal of getting to 10% versus are we
Providing-
discouraging
Yeah.
more because Matt Cole is exceptional. He's been doing, he's been leading organizations on affordable housing. So he philosophically is in a place that is unusual for someone to do this. And, I said, if the zoning for, and I'm not talking about the whole inclusionary, we don't want to, with the bigger projects where affordable housing developers come in and this is like part of their routine. But could we carve out something for those small units, the ones where you have 1 or 2, and put in the zoning deed restrictions that those 1 or 2 must be affordable, but not have them part of the SHI, therefore not have them part of all the. Is it possible that they could avoid all of the government administration if we agree that we don't care the 1, 2 here
If
and
it's
there,
not on the
SHI, and we could just have deed restrictions that would guarantee affordability, but not
Guaranteed workforce.
workforce.
But 40B then stays in play.
Oh, I mean, it does, but it's gonna be in play for years. And we're only at little over 3% right now.
So the question would be, so that's right, so if you're saying for the next several years, not to bother with it.
Yeah.
Let them, can we recoup them later and add them to the SHI 5 years from now, when there's more critical mass?
For individual, yeah.
So let's say we approve over the next 5 years, we another 20 one-off cases.
Yeah.
And we skip the SHI list and we go to, like what Mary was saying,
Just workforce
do
housing.
everything. And then when we feel that, okay, we have this backlog of a dozen units that are not counted towards the SHI, but now we think. If we,
I don't know the answer to that. I know that, minimally, they would have to go through the entire process with the state.
Yeah.
But whether or not you can, put something into, play where it wasn't that way originally, I'm not really sure.
Because they wouldn't have done the lottery, they wouldn't have done, the initial lease up wouldn't meet the state requirements.
But
Right.
And I'm short of picking somebody out and
Well-
starting over.
I mean, if there was a vacancy, you could look at that, but whether or not that would be acceptable to the state, I don't really know. We could ask. I don't.
If, cause I kind of see the path that you both are thinking about to, and a question from the developer side, if we do decide that projects under a certain number don't have to meet the SHI requirements and all of the things you're talking about, and they just have to be at a certain level of affordability for workforce,
the deed
whatever.
restriction, we can enforce the deed
Yeah.
restriction.
But does that hurt the developer's chance of getting funding that they might be counting on? From the state for their project? For example, using Matt's project as an example, is he, because he's doing this and getting this SHI unit, is he counting on any state funding?
No, not that I'm aware of, and I wouldn't anticipate that would be the case.
And there actually isn't any,
Any funding for something.
funding available through the LIP program. So, I don't know
At
that,
this point, right?
yeah, it's just technical assistance
Okay.
through LIP.
That's,
So, but I don't know that one unit would qualify for state funding, subsidized.
okay.
And just another point, when we did our inclusionary, we looked at a lot of models. And we took a fairly aggressive stance in terms of the trigger at 5 units. I mean, there are other communities that have that, but many don't start until 10 units. And one of the thinking we had was, we desperately need units, so let's count as many as possible. But also all of the zoning where we were trying to promote top of the shop, small units. We want to be sure we captured some of those. So I still feel that, especially as we look at Townsend Plaza and everything we just did in the DCPC, I would hate to I'd hate to have everybody come in and all top of the shops become 4 units because no one's gonna do that 5th unit because it's
Right.
just a burden. And so it's more of a practical reality.
Yeah, and I think that if I remember correctly, Wellfleet back in the day when they started their ADU program, they did deed restrictions at 80% AMI. And I think that was pretty much it, but it provided housing. So in terms of the SHI, I think it's a decision to make whether or not that's important, or if you want to go, just the basic deed restriction route and what those parameters look like.
Right. I mean, I think that makes, if you look at the chart on the technical report on page 5. Where it's talking about the project units, the inclusionary zoning unit, and then whether that's affordable housing with capital A or workforce housing. Maybe we just make adjustments to this so that in the first, I don't know exactly where to draw the line, but if the project unit's 12 units or 15 units, or I don't know where the line should be, Paul, but at some point we say it's fine for them to just be workforce units and they don't have to be work.
Well, let me ask another question along that. I mean, I think if you, because I know there'd be a lot of support for this in town. If you got out of the SHI and we just are doing deed restrictions, would then we be required to maintain the 80% affordability? I'm not talking about going up to 200 or 150%, but there's always been a pressure to say, what about the folks that are at 100 or 120? You know, we have a lot of people in town who just are a little, and if you think workforce, where in Matt Cole's situation, he wants to have literally his workforce live above the shop.
Yeah.
He's gonna have tradespeople there, and so, if he's paying a tradesperson, it may not be 80% of AMI unless he's got the most junior person on the team.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's really, I think, up to the powers that be to make those decisions, and I don't know how anyone feels about it, either way. If you're just looking to get year-round housing,
I
you
think
know,
in the crisis that we're in, we need any kind of housing.
Right, that's where I was.
And so-
That I would rather see Matt build 6 units.
I mean, you require year-round occupancy.
Right, you
Well,
round.
is that a legal question we have to answer?
Yeah, it's pending.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
Assuming
pending.
we can do that.
There's a
Assuming
legal
we can
question
do
as
that.
to whether you can
Right.
require year-round housing.
Assuming we can
That's
do
a-
that, workforce housing, as we're generally using the term, and we have to do a definition, but that adds to solving some of the crisis. We're at 3.5% on the SHI. To get to where we need to be at 10% is going to require big projects. It's going to require the tea time and the down off Holmes Road project. Those are the projects that are really going to get us to the 10%.
Okay.
The ones and twos and threes of these little projects are important for the families that are gonna live there. But they're not gonna be critically what's gonna solve our SHI problem. It is what I think.
And I think, with the inclusionary zoning, I mean, I think it's an assumption that when you do something like Village at Nauset Green, it's year-round housing. And they are restricted. So I'll be
Right.
interested to hear what legal says. But if it's under inclusionary zoning and you're requiring that it goes through the LIV program as a local action unit, then you're essentially requiring the
Year-round occupancy.
But if we don't require for the lower tier, then it be SHI, capital A, affordable. We come up with a different definition that fits this table, then we've created more housing, and that's what we need.
Yeah.
We need the SHI housing a certain amount every year. We have to have it in our plan how we're gonna get to a certain amount every year. And so if we anticipate other ways to do that,
And back to your comment too, I mean, if it stays the same, 5 units triggers the inclusionary zoning, what is, even if it's just a year-round occupancy, what's the incentive?
right?
And I was gonna, as a realistic take on whether it's affordable or workforce housing, we're just looking at stuff that's down mid-market. Things that are by definition being built above the store or being built, 5 or 6 units at a time on the parcels that we're thinking about. We've already sort of zoned out any luxury condos getting
Right.
built there. So we've sort of made it so that things that get built should be somewhat affordable, or we've done the best we can to make them affordable. And this feels like it's gonna be, puts a drag on all of that. By making them
Capital A.
inclusionary as well.
If we're making capital, inclusionary. Simplistically, I think, inclusionary, just like this chart shows. You have, we, as the policy, have a choice. Whether it's capital A gonna meet the lit program and qualify for the SHI, or whether it's workforce housing, which doesn't require those.
Workforce housing doesn't count towards the SHI.
It doesn't count towards the SHI, but it still creates a workforce house unit. that we desperately need. And so we get to choose as a policy for those smaller projects, how we want to require them to be. We can still require for the workforce housing a deed restriction. Once we settle the full-time legal issue, we can still set in a deed restriction of workforce at a workforce level.
And the discussions we've had about workforce housing was that we required it to be rented for at least 3 or 4 months to the same person. Because
Then
you also
hotel-
have seasonal, because the seasonal housing and the workforce housing aren't necessarily, we interchange those topics, but are they the same?
Well, we did in the Northeast End zoning, we did make some definitions for seasonal housing and what that would look like.
The seasonal workforce housing is primarily summer months and your weekends, total time of which shall not be less than 6 months during one calendar year.
Right.
And, when we talk about workforce housing, the vision of that is as businesses like Matt and others along the corridor get redeveloped, we're really incentivizing them with height and whatever to build these small units. But the reality is, and I'm not trying to exclude anyone, but he's looking for his workforce.
Yeah.
And the restaurant is going to be looking for their servers, and they're going to be looking for the people that are going to support their businesses. So to be in regional waiting lists is going to be contrary to, we're trying to make the argument and what we've heard from developers a lot last year was there's no money in commercial. The commercial is just a drag. What people are paying in rents right now and what the cost of new construction is, it's going to make it unaffordable to rebuild some of the commercial. So the notion of allowing housing to be on the site gives these commercial developers cash flow that can offset some of the construction costs. So again, I think it's sort of that objective of what we're trying to achieve there.
Yeah, and with the going through the WIP, a developer or a landlord would be required to be not only within the income guidelines, but the rent guidelines as well. So it would restrict,
Do you understand what that means?
The rent guidelines?
The rent guideline means that if it's capital A affordable housing, the renter can only pay up to 30% of their income towards the rent.
Oh, I see.
And so
Okay.
if the,
In addition to the AMI
well,
requirements.
based on whatever the AMI is. So if it's 80% AMI, and I don't know it right off the top of my head, but they could only, the most they could get from, let's say, a 1-bedroom is 1,400.
So the workforce,
It's actually more than that, but
workforce housing is 80 to 120%, right?
yes.
Why would we not allow someone under 80% to occupy workforce housing if they're workers?
Oh, they could, but you're dealing that would be just letting the market adjust
the
that.
thing is, it's two different requirements that sometimes are contradictory. So you could have somebody under 80% occupy a workforce unit that could go up to 120%. But they may not be able to qualify because their income is too low to pay the rent for that unit.
Oh, I see.
Okay. So because it's a two-way thing.
Right.
That Village Plaza Green, we had a lot of people apply. Not a lot, but people applied there, got through the lottery, but they didn't even have enough income to make the minimum amount that was required based on their income and the requirements for what the rents had to be. You have to balance the two different things all the time. And it's sometimes it's tricky because it's just tricky. So
Reworking this bylaw, it doesn't preclude anyone from voluntarily doing affordable unit if they wanted to, and if they needed funding.
right.
We could do it, so it gives you,
An
they
option.
could come to the housing trust and say, can I get a loan or a grant? But that's an opportunity for them. Then we can say, okay, but now we want this to count on the SHI. And but that's kind of a voluntary situation. It's not mandating that it has to be. So it doesn't exclude creating affordable housing for those smaller projects.
So if we were gonna change this, for using the table on page 5 as an example, where would you think we should draw the line?
Well,
Any suggestions?
the bylaws that I looked at are kind of all over the place, so, you know, Dennis and Yarmouth are both, at 5 to 9 units is one, but they don't have all of the SHI stuff. Chatham is kind of completely different, where they don't trigger until it's 10, either you're creating 10 subdivision with 10 lots or creating 10 units, but they don't have any of the SHI stuff, so they just handle everything through a local regulatory agreement. And actually, the way that, because Matt Cole shared this info with the project he did in Chatham, because that actually came through a special permit, because this gets to a point I'm gonna make it second, but our bylaw doesn't really have a lot of incentives built into it, so that's another point. He did a project in Chatham where he was trying to get some density, and he had to go to the zoning board, just not because of inclusionary, just because he required that. So the zoning board, he negotiated with the zoning board to get some inclusionary, and really it was just through a much simplified local regulatory agreement, and the town signed off on it and got registered. So
I think that's.
that one is a lot more flexible. There's not as much, so that's kind of the other end of it. I think it really, you know, if we kept it at, you know, 0 to 5, I think what I'm hearing is we might be able to keep the numbers. It's just that, you know, 0, you know, the lower threshold isn't gonna trigger SHI, so that we can craft our own regulatory agreement.
Right.
I mean, this is the big thing. It's just, do we want these to count on the SHI or not? I mean, that's kind of the major policy decision, because if the answer is we're comfortable not having it on the SHI, then we can devise appropriate, less onerous requirements that we still protect the unit in the long term. The other thing I want to bring up is the way our bylaw is set up now, it's a special permit, no matter what. So even if the project was completely like cookie cutter, great, like nothing weird about it, was gonna adhere to everything that we wanted, no issues whatsoever, the developer still has to come to the planning board to get a special permit, which is discretionary. So one other thing to consider is if we want to remove the special permit criteria from inclusionary. So we rework this, it remains in the bylaw, but it's basically the inclusionary is by right. If you're triggering the amount of units, you gotta do the bylaw. But if you want to get a density bonus, or you want to get a height bonus or a setback reduction in order to add more units and therefore increase the number of housing units, in that case, you would go to the board for a special permit. That's more like what happened in the Chatham exhibit.
That's Boston too. Boston, it's kind of a by right.
Yeah, and this is what happened with the Matt Cole project. He was in the ECSD, so the nature of the project triggered site plan review, just for the architecture, the landscape, and the site work. In addition to that, he also needed a second special permit. He needed a special permit for the site plan review, and then he needed a separate special permit for the inclusionary. So it kind of creates, and that is likely to happen a lot, especially in the ECSD. So it's kind of a extra regulatory hurdle, and you end up, so whereas, like I said, it could just be, most of the time, I would anticipate project's gonna be coming to planning and zoning board anyways for something. And you bake in the special permit piece inclusionary wherever, only if it's necessary, and that's a way to work in incentives. And so the other thing that's pointed out in this report is that in the bylaw, separate from ECSD, there's just a general blanket provision in our zoning bylaw. It's been there forever, that you can request a special permit for use is not specified or not specifically prohibited. Basically just a
Catch-all.
catch-all. So they pointed that out, that that's in there, but it's not linked into the inclusion area at all. So that was another way, if we want to go down this route of taking away the special permit, we can link it to that general provision, and then that's where you can have a developer come in and say, okay, I want to do something outside the box here, but in order to do that, I need to go to up to 35 feet or whatever it might be. Then it's special permit, and the board can really get in and work with them, and whatever requirements or conditions we need to, feel good about it, we can add them on.
How many developers will have the initiative to go do that versus look at this and say, I don't even want to try
Yeah,
because it's too bureaucratic.
Just do 4 units instead of 6.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it seems like the SHI is a whole separate issue, right? It's designed for the larger complexes and all the burdens that applies to that versus what we're trying to do here, which is get smaller units, encourage smaller units, and let's not put the burden on there.
I think the burden of meeting the SHI requirements is the first thing that will turn off a developer.
Right, right,
Do the 4
right.
units. So if we in some way carve out that burden from the small unit, that's the first part. The other piece I was just speaking about, I think actually that's the part where we can encourage, because we could say 5 to 9 units, you're only gonna do 1 inclusionary, we're not gonna make you do the SHI. So we got more local control, we can work it out with a more simple regulatory agreement. If you want to go above and beyond and create extra units than the 1, you can do that. And then in order to do that, you're gonna have to go higher or go out to the set, whatever it might be. You can do that, but that's when you come to special permit so that you can get.
Because you're asking for height or variance.
Or density or setbacks.
Right, so someone who just wants to go plain Jane, I'm just gonna do the 6 units, I'll do my 1, and I'm fine with not doing the lottery, I'm happy. I'll do what the town, the bare minimum will be, that's fine, they can do that. But we put this on the table, it's like, yeah, maybe not, let's do 2 or 3. If you're able to go to 35 feet or squeeze in a few extra feet on the setback, and they realize that, I can get a couple extra. Whatever, I'm gonna get some extra market rate units and 1 additional affordable unit. That's the incentive piece that we could build into this.
Can we build? Not in the bylaw. But at the same time that we're changing the bylaw. You alluded to this, I'm thinking about incentives. Can we build another incentive that says if you build in an extra above and beyond inclusionary unit, you can go to the trust and get $50,000 or I don't know, something from the trust, do an application to the trust for construction funds. So that there's an incentive from the trust. It's not in the bylaw, and that program could go away. It's not gonna automatically be there forever and ever and ever. But at the same time that we announce the changes with the bylaw for inclusionary zoning, the trust announces, by the way, we have a new program in place and
If you build these
incentive.
workforce units, we will help subsidize. I mean, yeah, and that doesn't have to happen in the bylaw, but I think
No,
that would be, and what's good about that is, so we're gonna be a little hamstrung a little bit for a time being around density bonuses and things like that. I mean, we have some of it in the DCPC because we have big things, but we're gonna bump up to wastewater issues
Right.
around density. So,
Right.
But I think you're absolutely right. That's always that we can't solve the wastewater thing, but we can put it in the zoning so that if they have the wherewithal, then maybe
they do it.
maybe they put an on-site treatment plant, maybe if they can make that financing work. But if we don't have anything in the zoning, then
Right.
it's kind of all dead in the water. So the wastewater piece is the one that you can really someone can work on that case by case if they can afford to
Right.
do something or make it work. But if it's not in the zoning as an opportunity for anybody anywhere, it's not going to work. The other thing, just to kind of tie this together, was in the Matt Cole project on Massasoit, he did need that height bonus to go to 35. to make the whole thing
Right.
work. So that's kind of, and luckily that was already provided for in the zoning, but outside of DCPC,
Right.
we don't have that capacity.
And we talked about this at the trust meeting just briefly, but thinking about what the trust could do to help create some incentives. A program that is having some good success in Virginia that I just happened to be reading about is that they, separately from what's in the bylaws and requirements for adding pleasure units, they will guarantee the developer for a period of time that the tax rate that they pay is they have a bonus that comes from the town, the city, that keeps the tax rate at the same level it was pre-modification for a period of time. So that it helps them financially in their operating expenses going forward because their taxes don't go up because they've added more value to the property. So it's something that we talked briefly, very briefly about at the trust, and I'm getting copies of the stuff from Virginia to take for the trust to take a look at. But that could also be outside of the bylaw itself, an incentive,
Programmatic incentives,
a
yeah.
programmatic incentive, but it's very much related to the bylaw and the density bonuses and the height bonuses that might be available. Again, if we decide that that's a program to pursue, it was extremely popular after they put it in place. And it doesn't last forever. And it's not, I forget, there were very particular words that they had to use about how they do this. It's not a rebate on taxes. It's not a reduction in taxes. It's a bonus that comes in that's equivalent to the
Yeah.
tax rate. Like a grant.
Um,
Anyway,
I mean, all of these programmatic ideas that you're speaking about that could happen through the Affordable Housing Trust, I mean, it just strikes me that, you know, one of the concerns I had leaving the DCPC is the economic viability of Town Center Plaza, given, you know, just the feedback we heard and construction costs and all of this. So I think all of those things, Carolyn, are really could be very helpful, not only just for these little bit here and
Right.
there, but really thinking about Town Center Plaza.
Right.
You've got tenants paying $12 a square foot, and the contractors, at least a year ago, said we've got to get 25 to, in some cases, $50 a square foot. So that takes small business out of the equation. And, you know, how do you manage all the economics of that in such a way that people can still do this work?
so I'll put this out there. We tend to do things by consensus as opposed
Of
to
course.
formal voting, but it seems like the consensus is to agree to not require the SHI requirement for the smaller
One-off.
projects, whatever, however we end up defining what smaller means. And to remove the special permit requirement. And make, set it up so that if there's density or height or some other reason they have to go for special permit, it gets discussed.
Inclusionary is by right, but not,
Inclusionary is by
but
right,
not a special
right,
permit.
right. Does that seem like?
And there's the third one, which is to potentially increase it for the smaller units. Potentially think about whether you allow the income levels to go to 120%
Oh, yes, yes.
to capture that workforce.
Well, the workforce,
Sure.
Paul,
Oh, wait, just say Paul was clarifying.
the workforce housing definition does go up to 120% right now.
Oh, and we have that in there.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, it's in there. Okay,
And
so
then
we
we
don't have to address
leaving
it.
it at 120.
The seasonal communities, I don't know when this will roll out, but they're looking at 250% the AMI. That makes a difference.
what's the AMI East Ham possible right now?
It depends on the Well,
Individ-
one, anything over affordable is determined by the town.
No, the actual
So-
AMI, the number,
What's the AMI?
it's like 94,000, so.
I don't know right off the top of my head. not
But it's
for-
in that ballpark.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers right in my head.
Depends on the
But
size,
The
the,
size.
Family size.
Depends on the family.
Oh, I know that,
size,
yeah, family
yeah,
one.
But the
It's in that
median income, I'll just look it up and tell you, but I don't have it right off the top of my head.
The, so what other benefit having these units count towards the SHI? What other benefit does the town get from that? Other than it counting towards.
that's really the major,
That's it.
that's the big
To
carrot.
avoid, to keep control on the larger. Has there been a 40B project in town before or one proposed?
Well, tea time was
There's been
originally proposed.
proposed. The only one that's gone through start to finish is Nossa Green, but that was a friendly 40B meeting.
Yeah.
It was town property, so we were, so. So the other thing to remember though is.
Well, and I'm sorry, you just said something that I think is an important point. Village Nazi Green was a 40B, but friendly because we own the town owns the land and it's a 99-year lease. The town center and tea time, the town owns the land. And it could be, if there was a 40B, it would still be a friendly 40B because we own the land.
It's only 40B because we're invited. It's not even a friendly, it's by invitation 40B.
Yeah,
It's,
right.
So the question of, for 2025 HUD income limit for 80% of AMI for one person household in Barnstable County is approximately
That's
74,800.
8%. So the AMI itself is like 94, 96.
Yeah, about 90. Exactly.
Because I'm saying we're talking about 80% of
Oh, yeah,
AMI, 120 of AMI.
90.
Yeah.
If you give me the 80%, then I gotta.
Right.
And so back to the question of workforce, if it's 120%, which is still pretty low.
Well, no, now you're getting into someone who could have an income up to what?
200 grand. If they do 200.
At 120, at
And
120.
when you're at 1-bedroom units. It's one thing if you have a 2-bedroom unit, you can say, well, that's a family of 4, it could be one person working and a spouse staying home with 2 kids, and you're saying, oh, that's $100,000, they need help.
All right.
And on the other hand, you're saying, oh, this guy's a carpenter making $100 an hour. And he has a single unit apartment, it's not a stretch for them to live in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Or if you have two professional, maybe they're married and they're police officers, they're going to have a higher income.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they're gonna be able to find housing that.
Right. We just don't
Yeah,
have
fine.
any full-time housing available.
Right,
So-
that's why
Yeah,
that's why I'm
anything.
thinking of. I'm leaning towards the idea of saying. Let's raise the number to 8 or
I
9
am too.
before we make us go all through this. What I'm getting at is we're going through this whole process so that a bunch of single unit apartments. Can. Also, it's not even being subsidized, but they're being
And so you,
set up as affordable.
I think Martin is saying that we could, I think, define workforce housing instead of 120%, 150%, or what the state's contemplating, 200%. We should just do that. It's up to us. That's a policy decision.
The thing about the SHI number is it's always a moving target. So even you get to 10%, you have a window of safe harbor, they call it. So if a unfriendly 40B came in, yeah, the town has more control of capacity to rebuff it, but it's always the 10%. As soon as you have more year-round housing units,
Oh, yeah,
you're
it's shifting, yeah.
so.
I think the SHI, there was a defensive strategy with 40B that you got to the 10% because you did not want to have someone come in town and just build whatever. I think the economics building today is so different.
That's what I'm getting at. That's what I was trying to, I
Yeah.
understand the threat of a 40B.
Yeah,
And we don't have that many large parcels in town.
no,
And
we control.
something we control the 2 most important ones, which have a lot of visibility on the
Yeah.
highway. I know there's land that's gonna be back behind,
Yeah.
campground
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
There are only a couple of other
So
areas.
what if, I think, so exempting from the SHI the income level, whether it should be, I mean, I think consensus is probably, I'm sort of sensing it should be at least 120, but maybe higher. Maybe between now and when we have to make a recommendation, we'll get some guidance from seasonal communities. You know, if that comes out in the next 2 months, so we should be able to think through that one. And then I think we're kind of in a place where the notion of having inclusionary by right, but everything else triggering special permit feels like, feels like where we're coming down to. Is that
Right. Are there other incentives in the bylaws that I think they're somewhere in here, I can't remember now where it is. Talked a little bit about other bylaw incentives with parking spaces. Other requirements that we can. It's on page 17. Is that where it is, Jackie? There. Mhm.
well, a lot of this assumes that it stays in the SHI.
Yeah.
So it's hard to sort of think. Do we need, Paul, to this concept of, let's say we restrict some units or we exempt some units from the from all of these regulations, we just go to deed restriction. Do we need town council to weigh in as to whether I mean, are we really clear on the law? Like, we can do this? I think we are.
Oh, yeah, we can.
We can do this.
It'll
Okay.
Just be,
Just
what is the
asking,
appropriate
what's the appropriate number?
documentation?
Okay.
Well, yeah, well, so go back to just the chart, so. How would we want to do this? Do we want to change the minimum threshold? So just for example, if you said the inclusionary, well, you keep it as is and just say that 0 to 4 units, there's nothing. 5 to 8 units is triggers inclusionary, but the 1 unit is a workforce unit. It's not affordable, so therefore there's no SHI requirement and there's none of that. And then basically everything from there, 9 to 12, I guess that's a discussion. At what point do you want to get out from under the SHI? Because all these lower units are all.
I like round numbers, I pushed to 10 plus.
Well, so there's two things going on here. There was this whole, Jim Kilvahan did enormous spreadsheets. These numbers correlated to percentages where we wanted roughly about 20%. So there was a theory to this number. So I wonder, Paul, as opposed to like unwinding the theory behind these numbers, what if instead of making 1 unit is exempt, up to 2 units could be exempt from SHI?
Yeah. I would,
With deed restrictions. I mean, if someone wants to come in with 9 units, we can still get 2 affordable, 7 would be market 2 affordable, but we've taken the burden off that.
That's
So without-
that's a much smaller change.
It's a smaller change and it doesn't unwind all the other underpinning thing. I don't know,
So
I
you're
just
saying,
remember there was a lot of thought.
so 5 to 8 units would be 1 workforce unit. 9 to 12 units
Would be 2 workforce,
2 workforce units.
everything else.
And after, well, I think it's 13 to 17 is where you get into, oh wait, no, I'm sorry. 13 to 16 is where you get into 3 total units, 2 affordable, 1 workforce.
Well,
But do you really want to drop the workforce going from 12 to 13? Right, you're saying do 2 workforce units, or are you pushing over the AHUs into workforce up to 12, right? It sounds good,
right.
but then when you get to 13, do you really want to decrease back to 1?
Well, this is just the requirement, not that, so if you came in with a project with 12 units, we would say 2 of those have to be deed restricted affordable full workforce.
But this is maximum workforce units in this table, not minimum.
This is his analysis. This is not our current zoning.
Okay,
But we
yeah,
would
I thought he was trying to represent
Oh,
our zoning,
oh,
but
okay.
No, it's good, but yeah.
You need
We're trying to set, what is our
Do
minimum?
we then create an incentive? So let's say somebody is building a couple of parcels, at Teton.
Right, right,
They
right.
just say, okay.
Right. We probably want to change
We're
this.
gonna apply for an 8-unit development here, and then
Yeah.
next month, we're gonna have another 8-unit apartments on the other corner, you know.
Oh, just by
They
subtraction.
could just break their project up into each building could be a separate permitting process,
Mhm.
avoid.
Multi-step.
Well, the
the-
tea time in Town Plaza, since we control it, we control that.
Oh, but I thought they could do that
But
any
anyway,
project.
anyway.
Well, if it's the same developer though, we already have language that says you can't segment projects.
Okay,
If it's the same. And two different developers could come in and do one-offs and have that, but.
so is this what you're proposing, I thought made a lot of sense, so you'd say that the minimum AHUs would go to 0, 0 on the first 2 lines. And then the maximum workhouse units would go from 0 to 1, from 1 to 2.
I was trying to think of it from the point of view of the developer. So at what point does it make, from a volume perspective, does it make sense for them to go through all of the
State requirements.
And I'm thinking it's like 5 units. I don't know, maybe I'm,
That's where we started the whole discussion was with Cape Associates.
no,
Saying,
5 new units.
no, but these were 6 units and he was
No,
pushing,
inclusionary, I meant inclusionary.
oh, inclusionary itself, well, that's all the way down to 22,
I would take it as high as that.
but that's 22-unit project.
Yeah,
So talking about at 20,
at 22
at
units.
22, that those 5 inclusionary are local
That's a
restricted
big
units.
project, yeah.
Oh, can you put that, I don't have my glasses, is that,
Yeah, but
we're talking about the same thing, my markups there.
Okay,
With the project that they
So
were
that,
looking at.
so the inclusionary numbers always stay the same.
Yeah.
You're looking,
Okay.
Yeah.
What about at 3 inclusionary units?
okay,
So something that is up to 16 total units.
is workforce,
I'm asking Rachel if those types of projects start to get into state subsidy qualification.
Yeah, I mean, half just did one with the
yeah, that's what affordable development, Matt Cole's affordable development up in Orleans is 14 units.
So that's the same thing we're talking about, just so they know, that's what I think.
Where is that?
And they don't
Then the inclusionary number column stays the same.
Our chart.
Yeah.
On 80.
But they do have some subsidy.
Does their subsidy hinge on them being local action or live units?
They wouldn't be local action, I don't think.
This is our,
They'd be probably
that's the consultants, and that's just-
the 40B
Okay.
piece.
Mhm.
I believe.
right, our schedule looks a little different than this.
it's on.
I think
Funny how we're-
part of that is that once we
pushing the
figure out
workforce.
the numbers, we can
Well,
make
okay,
the chart.
so,
I mean, it's still.
Yeah,
so somewhere around 10,
So let me just go, so our actual chart right
Yeah,
now
okay.
is total units 1 through 4, there's nothing, doesn't move.
right,
Total proposed units 5 means you get 4 market rate units and 1 affordable unit. You have to, the 1 unit has to be affordable, you can't do it as workforce.
but we're recommending changing that.
Right, this is saying what's current, this is what we passed 2 years ago.
Yeah.
right?
Okay,
And then it's 6 through 12 units
Oh,
goes to the maximum 2 affordable units.
isn't this the situation, we could have, the chart says affordable / workforce. Didn't we alternate, the first unit has to be affordable, the second,
Well,
how did
it
that?
says no less than 50% has to be
Be
affordable. So
affordable.
if you have 1, then you have,
okay,
One, it has to be affordable.
2, at least 1 has to be affordable.
so 1 and 2.
Well, I mean, that,
So we have to
you're
adjust
going,
that language.
going back to the earlier conversation, is if we believe that workforce, I mean, I care desperately about affordable housing, but the sort of creating housing here, how do we feel about the smaller units, earmarking them as workforce housing with,
It's potentially, I mean, that doesn't mean that that's what the developer has to do.
no, well,
The
developer
so-
never has to do it, but nobody's economically gonna
Right.
take less rent and have more expense
I think
for 1 unit.
roughly project units in total roughly in the 10 to 12 range. If the requirements are that those have to include workforce, whatever the percentages are, how the table works out. I think makes sense. And anything above 12 is more likely. They're gonna try and go for some state funding, and it's a bigger project. And so requiring 50-50 from there on, I think makes sense.
50-50 what?
Workforce
50
affordable.
Capitally affordable, which means SHI, and 50% workforce. Which is what our original thinking
Of
was,
the inclusionary.
of the inclusion,
Okay, not of the.
not of the total.
Were you thinking of lifting the SHI requirement, just having it as affordable? Okay,
For the under 10 or 12, wherever
Yeah.
I can't see the chart. but-
The chart triggers 2 units at 9 and 9 through 12, and then you get to 3 units at 13.
So when it starts to trigger 3, that's when we say,
It's
Now you
straight
say
up,
SHI.
straight up
Yeah,
SHI.
right, and that's where
Wow.
affordable, that's where a capital A affordable comes in. So so basically we could look at it this way, is that you build 0 through 4, you do what you want. You're building 4 to 12, you have to have workforce housing. Workforce
and you
housing,
get
Back to 12.
Get inclusionary
Back to 12,
bonus.
yeah.
you get an inclusionary bonus for the workforce housing. And we're gonna define workforce as 120 of AMI.
Well, I think,
Whatever.
I don't
That's
think,
separate-
yeah,
separate
that,
topic.
we should
But
figure that
after
out.
12, we're going full blown lottery system, get on the list that FHS,
SHI,
SHI,
Yeah.
thanks, far back and that's it.
yeah.
Subsidized housing. in particular.
I think for a small town and a remote area, I think that sounds much more reasonable, we don't have that many 13, 14 unit families coming our way right now. And what you wanna restrict is exactly what's happening to Mac Cole. So as we redevelop Northeast Ham and somebody who has a small lot. Well, like, I'm just trying, like, off the top of my head, like
Mhm.
where the fence company is and stuff,
Yeah,
you know,
Main Street
they're only gonna fit 5 or 6 units in there.
Arnold's. There are a lot of places where.
Arnold's, blasphemy, you're talking about Arnold's? Yeah, you live in Arnold's?
The housing of Arnold's.
Have you met that Nathan Nicholson? Nikki,
Yeah,
that'll never happen.
5 to 12 total units. We remove the requirement for an affordable unit. You have to do a workforce unit, but we let out from all that. And then
Whatever the number,
12, but,
whatever the percentage.
right, but then
20%.
12 plus, basically the rest of the chart
It's the same.
is the same. You can still do affordable and workforce in the percentages worked out.
So let me ask though, some of the other examples you gave, that threshold changed to 10. Right, we're saying we're gonna change the threshold to 12.
Well,
Is that,
Only
I'm just
because-
asking,
That's
right?
what that's in the budget.
I think Dennis Yarma
is
chat-
trying to not undo everything we did and say, let's take this lower end and tweak it because it's economically not as viable and.
Oh, no, I
Yeah.
agreed. I'm just
Yeah.
asking on that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
change,
yeah.
that threshold
Some of
change.
those, the trigger at 10 is to say that anything under 10 units does not require any inclusionary.
Right.
So we're still
We're saying
requiring
12.
inclusionary units. They're just
Oh, I
local
see what you're saying.
inclusionary
Okay.
units rather than state controlled
Yeah.
units.
And above that, we had the 50-50, but only to put a maximum on the workforce. They could decide if they're required to have 4 inclusionary units, they could decide all 4 are affordable.
Mhm.
We're not preventing that. We're
Right.
just saying at least 2 have to be affordable, 2 could be workforce.
Yes, well, that's what it's in the
I know.
current, it's in the current, yeah.
Reconfirming. And then the corollary to all of this is, again, the work the trust might do to see what kind of financial incentive programs we can
Incentivization.
create that.
Well, I think if we relieve the burden, other than the deed restriction,
Right.
and then increase the level so that they could actually hire their tradespeople to live above the shop.
Right.
And then you guys subsidize it. I mean, I think that, I'm thinking about the DCPC where we had a vision of, as this redevelops, how do we incentivize all these folks to put housing on top? I think that opens this up a lot more, because Matt Cole is very unusual, the rest of.
Can we put the linkage term? Can we put a fee in lieu of housing so that money that goes into the housing trust?
We have
That's
that,
I don't have that
yeah.
now, but
I think we need to clean
how
up
does
the
that
language.
show up on the table? Like, let's say like Matt could have said, let me just write a check for $40,000 and be done with this. I'll build my 6 units.
Make it a little steeper. You have to put money, we could build the equivalent. It doesn't help them, well, it helps them on their project, like if they really didn't want any affordability or whatever. But
If they just don't wanna do it. it's not
Bias
financially-
did its stuff in such a way, just, we intentionally said, we don't really want people just to skirt this. But, you know, so we said you have to pay enough to actually build a unit.
So it's not just a.
It's not just a money thing, we're gonna give you $40,000 extra
If
dollars.
each unit costs $450,000,
Yeah,
he has to pay $450,000.
So that's never gonna work.
No,
So that's just a hammer to fixate, because it's not. If the cost of, because that's not their cost of building affordable units, they're still getting some income. Off.
Yeah.
And if you wanna have programs where the housing trust has significant money to build for development elsewhere. And I'd rather see them get 10 donations of 50,000 than no donations of 450,000.
I know, but then you won't get the housing.
No, because they have the money then to give grants to send other projects.
Yeah, but with only 4% of the land that can be developed, I mean, we have such limited capacity to not achieve this, especially in I'm thinking in the top of the shop stuff. If people can just buy out of this, we won't see it. I don't know.
it sounds like you could wind up with a situation where the trust is very well funded with no one.
But we've let the top of the shop stuff off the hook already, because the top of the shop stuff, they're not gonna have 10 units by that store. I mean, that you have to.
Yeah, but how about the back lot stuff that we just don't let them all to build? I mean, back.
It would be one developer, I would think,
Yeah.
doing Town Center Plaza.
Yeah.
We're talking about Town Center.
I mean, we've talked about moving commercial up front and have allowance for
Right.
a lot of housing in the back.
I see what you're saying about maybe making that incentive not so.
Or I just threw a number out 40,000, because that's what you said, the lottery costs 30,000, and there's other administrative costs, keeping the list and stuff, so it could be a higher number, it could be 100,000, 150,000, but I think the idea of saying. You either build affordable housing or you give us the average cost of your units, if you. No one's ever gonna take that option.
Well, nobody's gonna get a mortgage for that either. I mean, it's gotta be. You have to have income to show that you can support whatever money you're borrowing. Unless somebody's got.
Oh, it's as a builder, you're saying,
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Finance.
Because the trust couldn't replace. They decided to just pay us instead of building it. We can't build it for that. If it's $40,000. And we can't create an incentive to somebody else to build it. It's still gonna cost them for it.
No, but you brought up the topic of having an incentive program where builders coming in and saying, hey, you're building 2 units, if you build a third, we'll give you another $100,000.
No, that wasn't what I was talking about. What I was saying was, if they're going to be doing any project and they want to add, and they're going to follow the inclusionary zoning, we'll help them with funds for those inclusionary units, period. Not changing the formula, just saying if you're required to have one inclusionary unit, then apply to us. And potentially we can give you $100,000 or 50,000 or something towards that unit. Just to try and help them with the cost of building it. Period.
Yeah.
Do we
Yeah.
want to have the fee in lieu section as an option in?
2 years ago, we debated that at
At
length.
length.
No, I wasn't here, I don't wanna reopen that can of worms. But my way of economies of scale would be that if there's one developer who's going to go through the SHI and say, I'm building 14 units. And there's a few other people in the past couple of years, there's 2 or 3 that said, hey, I'm not like the Matt Cole instance. If you're able to collect 100,000 off of the 2 or 3 that chose to bail out. Once someone's building 12 units, then you can come and say, hey, we have $300,000 available, and you build, just all the overhead is already taken care of, the economies of scale of saying I'd rather get 2 more, 3 more units built than not get those 3 units built. I'm just trying to think of how the money flows, because having a whole bunch of single unit affordability things all over the place, all over town is unmanageable, and there's no economy of scale there.
Right.
And not that I want to see
We
everything
don't have to
going.
manage them if it's just a deed restriction. I
Oh,
mean-
no, in this case, we're talking about the affordable, not worthless.
Oh, and the
Once they're
affordability.
affordable, there's gonna be.
Yeah.
I don't wanna relitigate something, but.
Yeah, it also does bring, depending on what kind of unit it is, the monitoring of that by the town.
The enforcement of the zoning. That kind of issue.
Do you feel that these concepts and maybe with you and Rachel kicking around and watching seasonal communities and I'm just wondering whether you feel like you have enough information that you could come back and craft a proposal again, which we will, debate.
Or even enough to take it to Barrett to say,
Yeah, these are the big things. These are the big policy issues that I want to work through. The rest, from there, we can clean up and make sure clarity and consistency and all that kind of stuff. These were the two things that we need to clarify. So. And I think we can build in the language about the bonuses for density and dimensional. We will put into the IZ bylaw so that's clear what someone can apply to.
right, because they have a lot of other sort of little stuff in.
Yeah, this is good.
And it is anticipated by the end of the month that seasonal communities will be opening up a public info session to get feedback on their draft regulations, and they want to move that right along. So they're looking to have that finalized pretty quick.
Does anyone know how many towns in Massachusetts fall into the seasonal communities?
Oh, yeah, that's,
Let's be 20 or 30 or?
well, it's 15 on the Cape and then there's the Berkshires and there's some in, the Cape Ann area.
Okay.
There's,
So 3,004 or something like that.
yeah,
And you can request and make a case to become a seasonal community too, if you don't fit there.
yeah, because we had
Yeah.
we had to pass a bylaw.
Yeah, we gotta vote on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Okay,
We're automatically,
Qualified automatically, we don't
Yeah.
have to ask the state to be audited.
so I do have to.
okay.
Leave.
Thank you.
I want to just do a time check here. We were scheduled to go to 1. Does any of you have to run out the door at 1? I'm not trying to, I would like us to go through the feedback from last night so we can
Yes, that's okay.
get a little sense of what we want to work on next and, that type of thing. Does that work for folks? So maybe we got 10 minutes here. I don't know, maybe we can go to 1:15 and see if it goes 1:30 at the max, to see if we can get through this.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay,
Excellent.
well, we did number 1. The question of, and do we have this, do folks have this list in front of them? Number 2 was the Cape Cod Commission, single family to multifamily conversion. There wasn't an opinion on this, but it was more, there was a question from the select board. They would really like to know how many properties in town would be impacted by this, which is an interesting question. And it gets us to a larger question. Maybe we can touch upon of maybe doing some more work with Colleen.
Paul, would it, because it was part of the select board package?
Oh, do you have
Could you
it?
put it up on the screen so we can see it? Is that part of the deal?
No.
Okay. Because I know some of us don't have it in front of us.
So one of
What was
the,
the first one again, Mary? I'm sorry.
the inclusionary was number 1.
Okay.
And we've been discussing that and we clearly think that's consensus is private. The next one was sort of the single family to multifamily conversion. The notion of how many properties this, and this is valuable. And there's several of these, Martin and Tom when we started doing some of this work a couple years ago, certainly around development limits and looking at the town, we had the assessor Colleen came and she gave us some overview and some information. And this is where Jim Kilvihan basically spent 2 months slicing and dicing her information to get to a really granular level. I actually want to go back to my banker's box in the basement to pull out his analysis because he did a lot of work. But to get at it is, we theoretically you should be able to sort. We could give Colleen some definition of what's a large house. Is it anything over, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 square feet, or what is the definition, of a large, and say how many properties are there?
A single family to multifamily.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think we know that we've sort of set what the minimum size for a unit was 400 to 500 square feet.
Mhm.
I don't know. And I would almost think that anything is,
Anything could be eligible.
well, anything that's more than 2x of that. So anything that's, and that 1,000 square feet is pretty small. So
Yeah,
I agree. There should be sort of a limit that where you can divide the house, but it shouldn't be that big. The examples that the Cape Cod Commission gave were pretty modest houses being converted. But frankly, if you drive around and imagine a neighborhood and you say, okay, let's say there's 5 ADUs in this neighborhood versus a handful of these houses converted to 2 families with a side door versus a front door and a side door. Impact on the neighborhood. Subdividing houses, it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more economical. It's a lot better for the environment and a lot better for the neighbors than putting in ADUs. So I wouldn't have.
Well, and if I
So
could
I-
add into that is that an ADU doesn't have to be detached.
Oh, I know that.
Already.
Yeah.
You can already take my 1,300 square foot house. I could already create an ADU if I wanted to give my family a smaller place.
But
Build my
600
400
square
foot. Sure, I could,
Yeah.
right? That is possible. So let's start to get into what does it look like to have 3 units?
Right, well,
Right.
now ADUs are by right for primary dwelling, so if we're allowing houses to be
Split into,
split into a,
But the ownership stays with the primary.
Yeah, I
owner,
guess it
so it
depends.
doesn't create much more affordable purchase options.
I was saying, it depends, I think, on the nature of how it's, so if you took a single family home that you can split it into a duplex, essentially with minor. Now you got a duplex with 2 primary residents, each one is entitled by right to an ADU if they can, fit it wherewithal. As opposed to if you have like we always keep saying, an only antique house that is really gonna subdivide into a condos interior. That all those condos are not gonna be considered as a single primary dwelling, so not, slice it into 7 condo apartments interior, they don't all have the right to do a 7 ADU, so that I think we'd have to work through that
Right.
part of it.
and so the question that we're trying to answer is this worth our time?
It is an opportunity to create more
And I
housing.
think it is an opportunity, particularly since we have model bylaw from the commission.
But does ADU already cover that? Does the ADU?
Well, I
Yeah, but you can't sell the
Limiting.
ADU.
you get an ADU.
Can't sell the ADU?
And we also did zoning changes 3 years ago where we said, we had on the books that if you had 40,000 square feet, you could have a 2-family house on that lot. And we brought that down to 30,000 square feet. So anything over 30,000 square feet lot, already you can do 2-family, correct? Did I get that right, or we made that change?
Yeah, you can. I guess. So I haven't gotten into the looking at it, how, I guess just initially my thing was like, if there's a way to. Just take those big houses of a certain size that lend themselves more to the interior, creating a bunch of
Right.
condos or apartments interior, not splitting. Maybe this gets to just what's the size threshold, or type of how,
Yeah,
I think that. I guess there's like if
You're You're right, in that when this topic first came up, we're thinking of the big farmhouse, the big captain's
Right.
house that's out on Route 6 and is not, there is no market for that house anymore. Yeah, the market for those big farmhouses on 6A and Brewster is some wealthy person buys it and invests $2 million fixing it up. On Route 6 here in Eastham, there's a bunch of them, but that's not gonna happen. Nobody wants to live on Route 6. But if that was split up into 6 condos, you'd say, oh, that piece of property can get reinvigorated. That's where this conversation started.
Yeah.
But then when I started reading about the Cape Cod Commission and they're showing all these examples of 1,300 square foot houses being split into two 650s, you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense and is a lot less impactful in my neighborhood than having an ADU. And that doesn't bother me if that house gets sold in two halves and they share a septic system. That's all manageable. What I don't like is the idea that two neighbors build an ADU in their backyard. We allow that to happen. And then 10 years from now, we say, oh, I got to sell the ADU because I need them. Then all of a sudden you have a private property that's landlocked, stuck between four backyards that was never planned that way. At least that house was planned with frontage and
Right.
and is treated by services.
So again, the question is this a topic we should still consider doing this year? Is there any reason to say we don't? I think we should try, there's a model bylaw. Let's look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think with all of these things, I would take it off the list right now, is my gut. But I think it could be complicated in terms of, we've put restrictions, no short-term rentals in most of our conversion policies. Do we get into those limitations? How does this intersect with ADUs? I site coverage, I don't know, I'd be, open if we wanted to say, Paul, get us some data points. I mean, besides that, I don't know what the implications for this are.
Well, we haven't looked at it, so I think that's the point
Yeah.
is, let's take a first look at it,
And but do we know
what it means.
I think part of this is I'm waiting to hear when somebody from the commission can come and talk to us. I'm hoping.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So if that-
I think
like-
that's the way to go.
If that's like
Yeah.
early,
yeah, if we could do this
very
early,
soon meeting, then
that
that
would be
might help
good.
us figure out.
That would be
if this
really
is
good.
worth it.
Yeah.
But in terms of prioritizing it, do we know how many potential single family conversions are gonna happen? Are anxious to do this?
I don't think anyone's anxious.
It's not getting
Yeah.
brought to us. It's the Cape Cod Commission brought it up and
Yeah.
and we've observed the properties we're thinking about while we got along with six. There's some big houses that, these houses were built for fishermen, it's like in the
Mm.
fishing season, I have 6 people that are staying with me and they were seasonal housing. Same thing.
Could you
But it's
carve this
never-
out for those properties? I mean, is there a category? That's why I was saying, is there a category of properties as opposed to making a blanket? Because I'm trying to get the intersection between septic systems and density and
Well, I think,
and other laws.
you could do that as like, there's a size threshold, so, or it could be conversion to the type of unit, so it's only, you can do single to multifamily as apartments. You take the duplex, just creating a duplex out of it, or some combination of that. So it's kind of like an apartment conversion bylaw.
Because going back to what is the goal we're trying to achieve? Are we trying to achieve? We don't, I mean, again, we can have a discussion. We have not been, we've been trying to de-incentivize part-time, seasonal luxury housing. I mean, there's been a theme in all
Yeah.
of this stuff. So,
I mean, I also look at it as what's the housing stock that we have that nothing's happening with, and it's those old houses that are too big for anyone to invest in. So a part of that might be a trigger, like this is only the model bylaw that works if you can create 3+ units or whatever. So you need the size of the house, the type of the house. So no one's gonna do that unless you have that type of house where you can interior cut it up. So
And
there's things we could
Yeah.
probably look at to tailor it.
and then the intersection with historic.
Right, and that's
installations.
something that actually,
Yeah.
that was a program we had kicking around that never got off, but it was the idea of like, then you tie it into maybe CPA funding or historic funding with the housing, that whole thing. But yeah, in my mind, I know when you look at the bylaw, it goes farther afield. In my mind, I was always like, what can we do with these antique houses that impact, visually, no one's gonna know the difference, but
Right.
invigorating.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
all right, well,
And I wasn't, and the other part of, well, I wouldn't be in favor of putting deed restrictions on this type of conversion. I think that would put the kibosh on doing this.
I mean, so, I mean.
I agree with you that,
I'm just saying, we've done it for hotel motels, we've done it for cottage colonies, it's just sort of like, how do you carve out like this?
you don't have, that doesn't mean you have to do it all the time. I'm saying that we're here for more, we're here for housing and create more housing and make more affordable, housing, more workforce housing. Sometimes we're just trying to create more housing options across the board,
I don't,
all of a sudden.
I mean, again. The framework of, are we trying to, the town has plans and goals, and are we trying to adjust the regulatory system to support those goals? That to me is a different goal. I mean, I don't know any
Okay.
town plan.
I'm gonna call time on the
Time-
discussion.
yeah, so we should- we can have
Either the
this-
things-
I know that.
Yeah, we can have a philosophical
We'll have
discussion, yeah.
philosophical discussion
Okay,
as part of
But
it.
it sounds like this is one you want to keep on your list.
I think so.
And at least until the Cape Cod Commission
Yeah,
is able to
yeah.
present it to us, so maybe we'll put it further down.
okay, design-driven housing model bylaw for District D. The simplified version is, do we take some version of the DCPC and put it into District D? This wasn't tremendously supported by the select board, and I think the person who articulated it most clearly was Suzanne said, can we see if the elements of the DCPC work and are viable before
That's
we?
20 years out.
Well, I know, but that was, I'm just. And this would be. So the only other thing, there's only a few commercial properties that exist here. And some of the concern we have about protections about redevelopment. Paul believes that tightening up some of our definitions, we could keep some of the protections in there. We've got about 6 or 7 meetings. We've got a lot. So I'm just.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out where we go with this. Do people have strong feelings about this?
I have, I'm in favor of anything that we're doing to help invigorate development here in this particular district around town hall, the windmill. Is this the best way to incentivize some redevelopment here?
So pretty much anything in this district is gonna trigger special permit.
Yeah.
And so we don't have the guidelines, but we have special permits, so the board, if they choose to be empowered, they can empower themselves to push for design, type of design they want to see.
Okay, but to Mary's point, we've only got so much time.
So I don't know.
Sorry, the other thing I was thinking of
Yeah.
is kind of a stopgap is the design guidelines that we just adopted for the ECSD. I mean, those don't have to be just for the ECSD. The planning board could adopt them for use
Oh,
wider.
that would
So
be
that
excellent.
doesn't cover everything, but it gives you something to. So then now you're in before the special permit. We don't have anything hard in the bylaw, but we have the ability to refer to a document that gets us
Okay.
down the
That
road.
would be,
So you say your approval is dependent on the following
Yeah.
well, we'd have
CPC rules.
to propose to the planning board that they adopt the DCPC guidelines for this district or some version of them. And they could do that
Or at least
independently.
consider- yeah.
And then we could also tighten up the definitions and maybe get to be a little more protective. But
Okay, that might be a nice word.
site coverage, this has been a big issue. We shouldn't, I don't want to go into a whole discussion, but this was also probably the number one thing I heard from the board last night, that they wanted to look at this.
Yes,
So, the motel cottage conversion bylaw, this is gonna hinge on a legal issue. We're actually waiting for the AG to opine on this. Is this true, Paul?
Well, it's kind of wrapped into language we have in the ADU, so when we hear how
When
that.
we hear how the ADU is,
adjust.
we might have to adjust the
But
hotel.
basically, right now, this was gonna be the case with the Collins cottages, I mean, technically, everything was done by the book, there's no issue. Those are gonna convert to year-round use. But it's not gonna be used year-round, I mean, I should say it's gonna be converted to owner occupied, but they're not gonna be used year-round, so it's kind of like. So the question is, can we put language that basically forces it to be? And it's not, it's the year round, if it was, sorry, if it was converted to rental, then yes, they have to be year round rentals, but this is converted to.
I would never make Collins, like, for how many years before the high tide hits you?
Well,
Like,
there's
it's
a,
like, like
Yeah.
by saying that this,
And how do you
I
enforce?
can't go,
that? How
I
do you
can't go out the
enforce-
front door for, 4 or 5 times a week.
How do you enforce that? We don't even know how many people are using their homes seasonally versus
yeah,
full, full
Yeah.
year. We have no idea.
It was pointed out as
I
a
know.
loophole, and it's the same thing with
It's not-
ADUs, unless we get the
Yeah.
language we want.
Hmm.
ADUs, we allow. You can rent it to someone, it has to be year round, or you can live in it yourself if you're downsizing. And so, yeah, now it's owner occupied, but the owner still goes to Florida for half the year.
Right, we had a lot of trouble in our inventory when we were doing greenhouse gas inventories, figuring out which homes that are owner occupied are really used full time. We don't know. There's no info.
and there's at least in that, there's a reference to a Supreme Court decision, which is that I had never seen before in the coastal resiliency bylaw in the first page that speaks to a Supreme Court, Massachusetts Supreme Court decision that you cannot regulate tenure, meaning you can't.
Right.
I mean, it's been challenged like 4 times. You can restrict that you can't do short-term rentals. They grab that,
Yeah.
but on the other end,
Yeah,
you can't
can't.
force an owner,
Can't.
you have to,
No.
I
Yeah,
mean,
no.
how-
My mother's sick, she lives in Florida.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be there for
Yeah.
the next 4 years to
Yeah.
take care of her.
So we may
No-
not
no
be
place-
able to, but was this brought up as
Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
that might be on a lower priority.
weakness?
The zoning enforcement, this was widely supported last night, that we really need to have an enforcement capacity. My questions to Paul, really to work through with town council and staff is this an appointment by legally to take the function or designate the function from the building commissioner to someone else in the department, whoever? Is that a bylaw? Is that just a select board vote? Is that an administrative action? We don't know. So that's almost on Paul. I've just said, you gotta legally tell us what the parameters are here.
There was a lot of support for that.
There was a ton of support for that.
And hopefully that translates also into the budget.
Well,
That's not our purview, but I'm just plugging that.
well, I think as an individual, it's, Paul is a deployee, but I certainly made a pitch and I think anyone individually as a good citizen can make a pitch. And I would go to the finance committee when they're doing the budget and say, this is a critical thing, but
I know we can absolutely make the moves. It's just a matter of what's the mechanism. So
yeah, the
it
mechanism.
can be
yeah.
done. I know the town manager is supportive of it.
Mhm.
Jackie and I both think it's a good idea that our new building commissioner doesn't have an issue with it. So I think this can pretty much be done. We'll figure out how it should be done. It's almost just kind of like working it out upstairs, like what makes sense? How do we delegate the work? But what I would be looking, and we'll come back to the group with that, but what I'd be looking for is some guidance on what do you like, assuming we can now do active enforcement. What's the mechanism for that? When it gets to the point where we're gonna issue citations, start fining people, is that done totally administratively, or do we
Mhm.
then go bring it to the ZBA or whoever
Yeah,
and let
Right.
them do, so there's some, which is how I think the Conservation Commission works. So that's where I think it would be
Yeah.
good to have this group done.
Yeah, so you're saying whoever the support staff wouldn't be able to actually write fines, for instance, but they could say this looks wrong and then bring it to the attention of the.
That's an option.
board.
I mean, you could do it either way. You could have it completely like the staff is empowered to do the enforcement. And I think our policy in Eastham is always like, let's just try to get, before we start issuing fines, take people to court, let's just work towards, can we get to compliance? But at a certain point, where, at a certain point, you gotta start doing that. It can be totally administrative.
Would you envision that any type of fine or penalty that you put in place would have to be approved by the building commissioner?
I would,
Like, are we trying to off burden him? Or are we trying to take some of his power away at that point?
no, I look at it as we're trying to spread the workload
Yeah.
more evenly. So I wouldn't look to have to be approved by
Yeah.
the building commissioner. It'd be more like, do we want things approved by a board? So like, we've taken this as far as, we've written every letter, we've met, we've tried to mitigate.
Right.
The next step is we're gonna issue a fine. Do we want that to be that the admin staff is empowered to do
There
that?
goes the Board of Health.
Or you go to the Board of Health,
Conservation,
or you go to the ZBA or the planning board. And you have a public hearing and everyone gets one last chance to state why they're, and then the board says, basically, they direct the staff to that. Now
Yeah, if the board wants to hear what the building commissioner's opinion is, they can ask that.
Right.
He can weigh in away.
So it can be done either way. It'd just be
Yeah.
input from this group about what do we think is the best way to do it.
Right.
So do you
Rather than me
see
and
this,
Jackie deciding,
Yeah,
we're gonna do it ourselves.
Right.
We can have a discussion about it.
do you see this as like a one paragraph, there shall be this position, or is this a couple pages of here's how to do it? Because I'm also concerned on the other end of that, on what was the term that Jerry used, indiscriminate
Discrimination.
application, right? So how do we give this person and the department enough grounding in the, in the bylaws somewhere, so that it's not perceived as picking on people that spoke up because, they did this or that. I hate to say that, it's terrible to be thinking that, but it is the way it is these days, right?
Well, I don't think that kind of language could be in the bylaw. It doesn't have to be. And this is more like, what is the policy towards enforcement? Do we give you X amount of time? Now we're responding to a request for zoning enforcement, or we've driven around and we see this for ourselves and it's clearly a violation.
And that's where it gets a little
Right, but do we?
weird, right?
So we send a letter and we give you a grace period to get your act together, and then we send 2-3 letters, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then, so that could be bylaw language. It could just be more a policy that this group
Mhm.
can help vet. Like, what is a fair policy? How much time do you give somebody to?
I do think they need you do have to have due process. Well, that's top
Yeah.
of mind.
Right.
So having it come to a board is a better option than even having the building commission do it. So
But even before that, again, I'm trying to keep us out of trouble in the future, right? For someone who comes in heavy-handed, maybe after all of us leave. Do we have special police driving down the roads and taking notes of everybody? I'm just being absurd here, but it could be perceived that way by some people.
I think that's where
That's
spreading the.
Yeah, their policy.
It's spreading the staff capacity. But maybe in
So
future
more
increasing
effort.
it is because then if we start to do more outreach, say, pamphlets, flyers, smart, whatever it is, getting the word out that now because then we can say we've educated people. We send out letters every year, every season to all the businesses. Here's a reminder of the sign code or whatever. We don't have time and capacity to do any of that. So then we are really responding to one-offs, and that's, we're more open to that situation.
right.
Whereas we can say, now we have an active enforcement,
Education, right?
and now you are, at some point, someone gets called out on it, but if, you're always gonna be the one that. But if we can say that we tried our best to evenly educate and everyone's been put on notice. And we are targeting more than just the loudest complaint. That's where you display, we just didn't do this one because it got the most. We did it. We had the capacity to do more evenly enforcement.
Yeah, I just trying to avoid a really sticky wiki situation where someone speaks up at town meeting. Next thing, he's complaining that an inspector has shown up around his house and is looking for stuff and has found that, this or that is in violation, and he's being picked on.
Well,
So
you have.
we gotta
you have
avoid
to-
that.
I'm not even sure if we had a person doing this or if someone's, there is the capacity to be super policing. However, the discriminatory application is if we ignore 10 of them
Right.
and the
Of
11th
course.
we hate,
Of course.
and then
yeah.
we start finding.
Yeah.
Well, the 11th one has a neighbor who chose to pick up the phone. That's
Well,
not fair. either.
that was my second point last night where I said, we now have this reactive situation that in order to get enforcement, you have to file a complaint against your neighbor.
Exactly.
And
That's not fair.
That's
Yeah,
terrible,
yeah.
you know, so,
I'm sorry.
no.
I was just saying, but no matter how we craft it, it's always going to be that some people we're gonna get zoning enforcement applied and some aren't. That's just the nature of the game, because we can't, no one's gonna go around house by house by house and check everything. So we just need to find a policy that makes it as less discriminatory, less random. I would also suggest that in the wording of this, we constantly add in that it's zoning, education and outreach and enforcement.
Mhm. That would be good.
Makes it,
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that makes it
Yep.
more,
I think, no, I agree, that's good. I think the type of issue though, like, I don't think we're never gonna be at the point where we're driving around and like, oh, I'm seeing a shed that looks a little too close to the setback and I'm
Right.
pulling over. I mean, yeah, if a neighbor
It's not good.
complains,
You always have to allow
and
that.
then then there's a process for that. And what we're trying to do is right now, the process is that the neighbors thinks there's an issue. They log a complaint, it goes to the building commissioner. He's the only one empowered to deal with it. So and then it's really just the capacity issue and whether he agrees. So there's that. The other types of issues though, the sign code. Now I'm driving down, now I have the capacity to deal with zoning issues, not just the building commissioner, but I'm driving down the street and I obviously see an egregious sign code violation. They got 50 banners up there. That's the kind of thing where, I think the town is gonna expect that.
You can call it
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You're gonna pull in there and start the process, put them on
So, yeah.
notice. So there's different.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Can we just conclude? I love Carolyn's comments. You need to clarify the mechanism. Maybe you and Jackie and others can brainstorm some process, and maybe when we talk about this, a good comparison will be the Conservation Commission is very aggressive on both fining and suing, and I mean, they've taken aggressive enforcement. I'm not saying we just wholesale adopt that, but we should understand how at least one side of the town is working on this one. So come back, we'll definitely do a topic on that. Fence regulation. I think this is important. I thought some of the select board members were really open to this. I think this is going to be one where I put the Cape Cod Commission or maybe your planning group. Has someone else done this? Is there a model out there?
What was the feedback of the selectmen?
I mean, there was a lot of nodding. I mean, the issue was, it was presented that, the concept came up that when you put fences right to the property line without any landscaping, if that continues, you could have these walls of fencing.
And that's happening in the town.
It's happening. in the town.
Briskly right now.
It's happening right now.
There's a new poster child for this. I saw it this week if you drive in Meadow off of Massasoit. And some of this is being driven, I think, by the Airbnb proliferation, because people say, well, I need to have a private yard.
Yep.
And they throw up, but if you drive in Meadow, the house on the corner just surrounded the entire front yard with an 8-foot high solid vinyl fence.
Yeah.
Reflective as heck.
we need to do
It
this.
looks so out of place.
I know.
And I drive around the house and I'm looking at them on the side of the house. I'm like, you have cedar everywhere else. Anyways, but yeah, I'm a strong advocate.
I really like this, Paul, but I mean, is this can we get information about this or?
I mean,
We'll find
I'll
out.
ask on
Okay.
I can ask the planners listserv, but I haven't heard any.
So why don't we say this is a priority and we'll brainstorm. Camper and lodge boat storage, people very much want the camper, the select board was very high. There were several. Martin, they must have been channeling you. We're a commercial fishing town, we don't want to touch boats. So we got that.
You could have a carve out for people that have a commercial fishing license. Say, okay, you're allowed to have an extra, whatever.
Well, then you get
that far.
then you get into the whole, can you do commercial activity in a residential zone? And honestly, I don't, until this Mass Supreme Court settles that
Right.
that's like a
really the
political
issue.
nightmare to touch
But campers, yes.
campus, so we should really think about, but the thing is not just taking it from the select board and putting it either with the ZBA or the planning board,
We're
but
gonna have to see what, Mr.
Mr. What?
Jim. I say, oh, you were talking about, Kiblingham.
Yeah.
Now you're going after his camper.
Oh, no, we're not, no. Right now, the select board approves campers, and which
Yeah.
I'm sure Jim hasn't had an approved camper,
Yeah.
neither do I have an approved camper, so I'll say that. But the question is, question of the campers is, who should be approving them? Nobody is right now. And two, and on the books, it says the select board approves them. And two, are there setbacks from the road? Are there screening requirements? Does it matter if you have a 19, I got a 19-foot trailer, I'm going into campgrounds with 50-foot RVs beside me. Does that matter, size? I mean, I don't have the recommendation, but we have to look at this at some point, and it may be more than just which board looks at it.
Well, and it's pretty clear the select board doesn't want to be that.
The select board does not want to be the approval.
And I don't know whether this will end up being part of it or not. We talked about the issue of not regulating what happens inside the building. But I've seen campers that I'm pretty sure somebody's living in.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, especially
Yeah.
in summertime.
Yeah,
That's prohibited right now.
it is prohibited.
yeah, but I don't see better
It's-
calls.
Yeah.
So back to a prior point, right?
You know, but is it someone who has extra company for the weekend and they're staying there, 3 weekends
Yeah,
a summer
That's fine.
versus having someone live there year round, right?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I mean, there's one in my neighborhood that has Firebird
I'm,
players all
And
summer.
I think that's personally, I think that's fine. Seasonal, it's summertime. If
yeah,
it was parked at an RV park, people live in it, it's parked there.
It's seasonal. Okay,
Yeah.
we need to take a look at this. We'll figure it out.
and as far as I'm concerned, the camper, we're not getting, I'm not seeing more campers or more boats than I've seen in the past 25 years. But we are seeing a lot more vinyl fences. So as
Yeah.
far as I'm like,
Mm.
like we can wait with the boat one can wait till next year potentially, but
For Amy, Amy Ekman has been
Campers,
asking
yes.
for this since
No,
2008.
I think we should keep campers.
look, she's not on the ZBA, she's on the select board.
I know.
I'm on the CBA, I'm trying,
So
I don't want to become hard check,
let's keep we'll keep the camper and we'll kick the tires. Sign code, we got 5 minutes left. Sign
Oh,
code, this is important. And whether we open the whole thing up or we just deal with temporary sign code, can you come back to us, Paul, with a recommendation on that one?
Say that again?
Sign code?
Yes.
I'm asking Paul if he can come back with a recommendation. Some of the biggest violations right now are these temporary signs, so do we clarify temporary signs versus opening up the whole side code, or is there something else? So that's just one. And then definitions, Paul's just working through, there's some inconsistencies in new things we put on the books. We found language. Do you remember 2 years ago when we did,
It was the same as I looked up.
landscape buffering, and for some reason, I was thinking back, we put the word grass in as opposed to grasses, sort of plantings. And then we immediately people came in with just grass strips, no landscaping. So we said, well, we have to take grasses out because, who knew that? There's a bunch of that kind of stuff that we have to just be sure we don't have conflicts in. And so anyways, I think that's just Paul coming forward with his thing, unless someone, else wants to look at some of the inconsistencies.
Would that be something that Barrett could help us with? Would that be valuable, or is that too comprehensive?
I think I'd like to take a crack at it
Okay.
and see.
Yeah. And other examples, like we say things like, you're allowed to have a shed of about 200 square feet, but we don't define what a shed is.
Yeah.
We also don't, my particular pet peeve, and there's 2 of them in town, your ultra modern house, which we've all done ultra modern house, with the colonial shed in the front yard. It's like I want to go, what are you thinking?
Okay, so what are you saying? If you build a shed, you gotta match the architecture?
Yeah, I think compatible architecture,
But it's funny, the reason I said that, because that's what I spent my summer doing, building my Uber contemporary shed
Contemporary shed.
of 196 square feet.
Hey, well, we're gonna put that photo in the report.
Wait till it's gone.
So anyways, okay, let's, Paul, I feel like you've gotten a lot of feedback. We could, and what we do next time is going to be probably contingent upon if we can get a certain speaker in, or you can get certain work in and I can work with you, but we'll
Yeah,
try to go back to this list.
I think there's some things, I think for next time, I can have some of the definitions and do some work on the camper, definitely. Those two, and then I just want to have something that I can commit to. And if
Yeah.
we get, if it works out, we'll have the Cape Cod Commission at that meeting,
Yeah,
we
or
can.
town council,
Yeah,
or
we can
we can
schedule
figure
that,
out
but
who.
then I'm gonna try to have some of these
Yeah.
things, so if we don't have
Yeah.
anyone coming in, we can definitely still utilize the time.
Yeah, okay, all right, great. So just a reminder, our next meeting is in 2 weeks, 10/7. Before we close, if is anyone on the Association to Protect Cape Cod, APCC?
Mailing list, yeah.
Well, if you see the latest newsletter, one of our task force members,
Oh, really?
you haven't seen it?
No, I don't read that stuff.
You're in it?
You
haven't
are
read?
about 2/3 of the newsletter.
Really?
Your
Wow.
picture and all the work you did on your house to be
That
environmentally
was an
sensitive.
APCC, that was supposed to be in the, for the county. She didn't tell me it was on there as well.
I think it was the APCC. Maybe I read the,
Boston County.
maybe I got the Barnstable County thing. I get both of them.
Yeah.
I thought it was APC. Anyways, there's a big profile.
Really?
I'll,
My wife told me I should read it, so I get, that's how busy I've been. That's why I'm building the shed.
you build shit. Well, they've got you out there in photos, so congratulations.
Before,
Yes.
there was one other item that came up last night that caught my
Oh,
ear.
yes, yes, yes.
And I know it's probably can't be for this year because the plate is full, but it was the lighting.
The lighting, yeah,
And that's something that the
yes,
Energy and Climate Committee
Yes.
have also
yes,
been
yes, yes.
toying with. And I do have some, a model bylaw for that. If that's of interest for the future, that's something we could look
Please,
at a little bit.
please bring that forward. We put downward lighting, we mandated that in the DCPC,
Hmm.
but it is, correct me if I'm Paul, it's not mandated townwide, is it? Or,
Well, almost every permit that comes through for ZBA, we put down light
You-
requirements.
you
on
put
all
It's
the
a
exterior lights.
standard condition in every.
It is a
ZBA
standard condition?
For a case,
Yeah.
but not everything goes to ZBA.
And I
So
don't,
it's considering quite a few,
and
but,
how does that get enforced?
well, and that.
Because the
As
zoning,
we talk about enforcement.
because when the zoning,
Whether who's
building-
going to drive around it.
when the building
midnight.
commissioner comes, he just
Yeah,
makes sure
yeah.
that it's a regular type light that fits building code. He doesn't enforce. I'm trying to think if I have any that are non-down lights.
So,
There's the initial, something in a building permit that the inspector can. I would look at the lights, or zoning enforcement officer can look at the lights. It's then in practice, like as Jamie said at the select board meeting last night, someone who's got their lights on all night.
yeah,
But we're,
That's gonna be a neighbor complaint.
yeah, but I think we're probably talking about commercial first.
yeah,
Right, and large
I
lighting.
think there's a difference between light pollution and light nuisance.
Yeah, I'm talking like pollution.
Lighting, stuff.
Yeah, which there's a definition of it,
Yes.
but we
Distinguishing
have
that
it
between
somewhere.
residential nuisance.
For the DCPC, we do have
Yes.
we
light
put,
There are a lot of
we put those restrictions in the DCPC, so,
but not pro.
but we
not-
haven't done the whole residential areas.
Okay,
But I think that would be great if you could forward the bylaw and we could take a look at that. Jamie, Dimitri is very, very high on this.
but it's not retroactive, I assume, in DCPC, right? It's only for new.
As things.
For new
redevelop.
development. New development.
Section 3.8 of the bylaw.
Yeah.
2.8, okay, thank you.
I do know of, there's a little, well,
Press, you know that.
Spent a lot of time at 3.8.
Oh,
anything I'm missing,
that's
so I would
yours.
like, can I get a motion that we adjourn? And I want to thank everyone for the extra time today. So I have a motion,
motion to adjourn.
second?
Second that.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you so much.
Apologies again for
Yeah,
missing us.
You can